Hey everyone, this is Jack, and this is one of those episodes where I want to give you a little bit of context before we go into it. I kind of got away from doing episode introductions, just going straight into things, but this one, this is Christophe Boelinger. This is the designer of what is officially codified as my second favorite game of all time, Archipelago. This is a guy who has a long career in tabletop gaming with about as many different interests and hobbies as he does game designs under his belt. And this interview, I could not have prepared for how it actually went. So, to give a little bit of context, I live in Alaska, he lives in France, and so there's a huge time difference. And as such, I try to be courteous to the people that I interview who are especially in Europe or Australia where there's this huge time difference, or Asia. I don't know that I've done any interviews with anyone in Asia or Africa yet, but contact me if you're interested in coming on the show. Oh wait, yes, I did one with someone in Asia, but not Africa and not New Zealand. So we'll take care of that. Anyway, the reason that this is important is that I ended up scheduling this for 11 o'clock at night, my time, and I'm normally pretty good at night, and I was totally fine with that. It's not my preference because I want to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but if it's going to be much more easy for the subject of the interview to be in attendance or for them to be alert, then good to go. So Christophe was totally all about doing an interview, and I was thrilled about that, and we ended up connecting at that time, and something happened where he had to delay the interview for another hour and 20 minutes, I want to say. And so this time we're talking about 12:20 a.m. my time, and I'm starting to get pretty tired. I think I do fine in the interview, but the important thing here is that Christophe, I was not prepared for just how much he had to talk about, just about life, about interests, about hobbies, about games, about everything under the sun, whether it's controversial things having to do with Archipelago and some of the accusations of that have been laid at his feet, or if it's just talking about the time in which he had been doing hip-hop and breakdancing in the early 90s or even late 80s. He has a story to tell. And while I've been trying to keep these around 40 to maybe at most 60 minutes for recent episodes, we ended up recording for nearly 2 hours, and I have about an hour and a half of the core stuff that I wanted to put together, and I just felt like that was a little too much for one episode. So that's why this is being broken apart into 2 episodes, which you'll get here. So I want to give you that context to let you know what's up, and to say that each time that I asked a question and awaited some response, there were about 15 questions that came up in my mind that I wanted to chase. But I knew that if I was going to get to even half the stuff that I originally wanted and planned to talk about, then I needed to keep moving on from subject to subject. And that's the result that you hear here. That may be a combination of me being kind of sleep deprived at that point, and also just how exuberant of a person Christophe is. So I had a great time. I can't wait to have him back on the podcast and maybe focusing on just one of the 12 subjects that we end up talking about. But I'm really happy with the chance and opportunity to talk to one of my favorite designers and to talk to him about some of the new projects he has on the horizon. Most of this episode is history and context for who he is as a person, and part 2, which comes next week, is much more about Archipelago and forward. I leave this one on a cliffhanger. You'll hear kind of the final direction that I'm going here, and we'll pick that up next episode next week. Let me know what you think. I hope you dig the episode, and thank you to Christophe for coming on. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And today I'm so excited because the guest I have is the designer of one of my favorite games of all time. It is Christophe Boelinger. I have not taken a French class since, ninth grade or so. I'm going to butcher this entirely, so could you, for the audience, Christophe, pronounce your name?
In French.
In French.
Boelinger.
Oh, there we
Boelinger.
go. That's beautiful.
Hello, everybody.
Well, welcome to the show. I will hopefully not have to butcher that name again, but if it comes up, we'll just confront it at that time. But the real reason why we're here is because you're the man. You're the guy. You designed Archipelago, and then you've done Dungeon Twister and Earth Reborn. I mean, you've done what feels like a billion games, but beyond that, I mean, I've had kind of like a borderline obsession with you for the last several years, maybe, in that you're a musician, you're into outdoor sports, you're into comic books. You are just like a fascinating Renaissance guy in this hobby. Are there like other secret hobbies that I don't even know about that I have a mutual interest with you? I mean, tell me you're an avid cyclist or something.
I don't know. You want me to list quickly all the hobbies that I went through like in my life?
Tell me your current obsession outside of board games. What's the thing that's occupying your time outside of board games that's getting you really excited?
It's not sports lately. With the baby and all, I didn't have a lot of time. It's composing, I guess. It's music. I did a new track last night or 2 days ago, and yesterday morning I was dropping the first vocals and the first yogurt, as we call it, like when you just pronounce words but there's no lyrics yet. And on this one, my wife is always the first one putting the headphones on the head and listening to. When I feel like I can make people listen to it, then she comes in. And this one, she was really, really grooving on it and smiling, and she was totally like lifted up. So yeah, I guess apart from game, what I'm on right now is finishing this song, for example.
Oh, that's the best feeling in the world, when you're able to first bring a piece of art that you've created and just give it to someone else and it actually turns out good. There's nothing better. And we're totally going to get into board games. Like, for all of you in the audience, we're going to talk about all the cool stuff. But being that I'm a musician and that you're a musician, I have to ask, what sort of music do you create?
I fell into the music when it was the disco funk and beginning of the rap era. So when I was a kid and Sugar Hill Gang put out Rapper's Delight, as a hip hop,
the best.
The hip. Okay, this one, everybody was in France, like everybody was shocked. Like, the guy was not singing, he's talking fast. But me, I got so blasted by the originality of this new style that I was 12 or what, I knew Rapper's Delight by heart from the beginning to the end, and I could imitate the voice of each of the rappers in there.
That's awesome.
That was my. Then there was the dancing, Michael Jackson. In France, there was the disco, there was Serra, and I loved the music. My aunties and uncles, they brought me to a dance club when I was not even in age to go there, in holiday in Corsica. So it's not the dance club like you can imagine in New York or whatever. It's like the holiday summer camp. But anyway, I was 14, they brought me to a dance club, and it went on. And so everything I'm doing is, I would say, dance floor based sound. It's all electronic. I have a guitar, but I barely play guitar. I'm singing, I'm rapping, I'm writing. I started writing poems when I was 8 years old in French, and when I was 18, I was starting to write my poems in English. And those poems, of course, the ability to write poems became the ability to write lyrics for songs. So this is where I have the most easiness, or I don't know if you can say that. What's the most easy for me is writing the lyrics. And then I was looking for singers after. When I was in the US, I did 32,000 kilometers in my car, had tapes running all the time, and I was alone, and I was singing on the voices of all those black singers, women singers, rappers, whatever. I was trying to follow all of them, everybody that I liked. So when I came back, my voice worked a bit. I don't have a super great extra voice, but I can do things, so I could sing, rap, French, English. So I'm combining all that. And at the end, the style is R&B, electro, funk, house, slow, Oh yeah, and I had a lot of influence from the electronic music, from Jean-Michel Jarre, Kraftwerk, all those first musicians who started to really play with machines and keyboards. And I started really getting into the music and playing music when it was the beginning of the MIDI interfaces, when you could have the machines starting to talk to each other, the keyboards and the computers.
That's incredible. So you could have been like the third member to Daft Punk. Like that could have been a whole nother life for you right there.
Totally. Daft Punk I can totally find myself into what Daft Punk is doing when they first, not the very first album, was too much techno and electro, but they are the same age as me. They're the same generation. I can feel in all the latest album that they go to the disco funk mixed with the actual sounds and the house musics. And this is all the influence we had the most. So yeah. But there was a point. It could be a long discussion because there was a point in my life where I was not working. I had no job just for 1 year, and my objective in this year was to either become somebody in the gaming industry or in the music industry. And neither of them, for my mom, for example, were real jobs. And in a certain way, she started. Yeah, in certain ways, she started to put sticks in my wheels. I don't know if you can say that. Just put me out of those tracks. Mm-hmm. And I went back to a regular job, a computer programmer that I did for 12 years. And I think for the music, at least, I lost 12 years of my life in there. I could have done something in the music at the very beginning, in 1990, to be exact. And at that time, I knew already how to compose, sing, rap, dance, everything. I was doing dance contests. I was doing shows in Las Vegas when I was in the U.S. just for 15 days. But just like that, I did a dance contest. They got me. And then, boom, I was in a band for 15 days doing shows in the casinos and the clubs. And if you look at that time, sorry to say, but in the 1990, Eminem was not even out. In 1990, zero. Not in the 1990s. I know he came out after, I think. But there was no white guy singing, rapping, composing, dancing, doing all of that together. And my mom, she never saw that. Right, and me, right. I was not sure of myself at the time. I was not believing specially in me or what. It's just with the wisdom and the time passing that you analyze everything and say, damn, you knew how to do that. You knew how to dance like Usher, like Jackson. You knew how to do hip hop, turn on one hand and all that. And I broke my whole body doing hip hop because it was the beginning of hip hop. We defined the base, the beginning of the hip hop, and we're killing our bodies trying to find the new moves.
That's incredible. Like that's unbelievable. And that's the reason why you were in the US, is you were doing your music, dance, like all of that.
No, the reason I went to the US was a dream for me since I was a kid. Since I was my first memories probably was 4 or 5 years old. My dad and my mom, they kept listening to a record from Joe Dassin, who's dead now. It was in French, but he was saying, L'Amérique, je veux la voir et je l'aurai. And if you translate, it means the United States, America, I want to get it, but I want to see it. Je veux la voir, you can see as, je veux la voir, I want to possess it, or je veux la voir, I want to see it, depending on how you write it. But it sounds the same. So that was excellent. And I was not even writing poems at that time when I heard this song. So I want to see it and I want to get it. Okay? And this stays stuck in my mind. And after reading all the comic books, seeing all the superheroes in New York, I know there was no superhero in New York, but New York was the background I saw the most. So I wanted to see New York. And then the roller skating. I was totally into roller skating. I went 175 kilometers behind an hour behind a motorcycle with zero protection on the Promenade des Anglais in Nice. That is totally up, because I was barely 15. And in Nice, at some point, because there's been a few accidents with old people, roller skaters were hunted by cops. Crazy. And in the Venice Beach in California, in Los Angeles, I was seeing in the video and the movies, and I heard talkings that the cops were on roller skates. And that's true. So that was also the dream. I had to go there. And so at the end of my studies, there was a huge contest in my university, and they were sending only one person to teach French in North Carolina, UNC, University of North Carolina. And me, when I heard about that, I was like, I have to have this spot. It's for me. Nobody else in my university can get this from me. This is my only way to.
It's destiny.
Yeah, I need to be, and I did everything I could, and I got the job. And so I spent 1 year, two semesters teaching French to students. And then when they finished in April, I think it was the 22nd of April that I rendered all my grades and everything and that I could leave. I packed everything in my car and I started from North Carolina and I went all around the U.S. And that's when I did the 32,000 kilometers in less than 6 months or something like that. Then my visa stopped and I got back to France.
That's a good reason to go back.
You saw the movie Into the Wild?
Oh, yeah.
I saw this movie, but many years after it came out, I was crying all along the movie. The guy's name is Chris. He did that in 87 or 88. I was there in 87 or 88. Apart from the part from in Alaska, sorry to say, that I didn't do, and I'm glad because I'm still here. All the rest of the movie is almost like they were following me and filming me. What he did in Grand Canyon, I almost did it. I was about to take a boat and go down because it was so expensive and they owned the Grand Canyon. I was like, what the you make me pay $2,000 and wait on the waiting list for 1 year just to go down in something natural? If I want to go, I cannot. No, you can't. When I saw this movie, I was like, damn. And his name is Chris. What is that?
It's your story, man. I think this is a good transition point to just kind of talk about like this clash of cultures, because I know that there's a bit of an age difference between us, but in like 1990, I know that in the United States, that someone who is really into hip hop, into urban culture, who is into R&B, that wasn't typically the same person who was also really into tabletop gaming, which I know that you, as a young man, you know, early on in life, you were also attracted to this gaming thing. And you even spoke to, you were thinking that there were two paths, that you wanted to be a professional person in the gaming industry, or you wanted to be a professional person in the music industry. Did you feel like this was a clash of cultures, like a duality, or did these things not feel so mutually exclusive to you?
I don't know. I never studied that way or that part. I think, to be honest, I would have liked better to be successful in music. It would have brought me much more fun and probably be a lot more richer in life if it would have been successful. Huh? Mm-hmm. Just imagine all that. Huh? But my life could have also turned out not as good because it's not the same type of people in this business. You don't have the same relation, I guess, with your fans and all. They forget about you probably very fast also, whether games, if you're still doing good games and they like, you know, they're going to keep playing or what. I don't know. And for sure, nowadays, to make money with the music, because you know everything is digital and all that, it's not the same to be put out nowadays with a publishing company, record company, as it would have been in the 90s. In the 90s was very difficult. Beginning 90s was difficult also to do it, certainly, but they were taking people. And nowadays, they're not taking people anymore. They're taking two, and they are the ones who win the TV contest, singing TV contest, or whichever country the record company is located in. So it's not at all the same thing.
Right.
So
right.
If I look back nowadays, I'm like, okay, it's better to be in the gaming because at least the games, it's really kind of hard to copy or put digital and send all around the world or leave it on the internet. You could, but it costs you almost as much to print it with ink than to buy it, kind of, depending on how much material. And the miniatures, go for it if you want to sculpt them 3D and all that. I mean, so whether the music... I'm not sure I would have some jobs. Or, you know, people in the music industry, they're not all very happy, I guess, with the money they're making to survive. So on that part, I guess it's better. And then I still do music. It's still a hobby. When it's a hobby, there's no constraint, nothing. It's not the same feeling when it becomes a job. The best would have been that I've been in the music business for like 10 years and when from the 90s to the beginning of the 2000s, and then I would have switched to games because I would have never dropped the games, even though I would have been in music, I guess. Now, about this duality that doesn't go together, because this was really your question, correct?
Yeah. I think it's just at least stereotyping in American culture that the person who's playing these games wouldn't be the same person, wouldn't have the cred, wouldn't be seen as cool enough to also be playing this music. And I know that's a little bit different for me. Like when I was in high school, it was much more, I think, blended cultures, a lot of cliques, as we describe it. Social groups had kind of broken down, and the people who were playing sports could be the people playing games, could be the people who were really into music of all types. And it was less segmented, but it just seems to me like these in the US in the early 90s would have been seen as completely opposite cultures, and very few people would be part of the same groups.
It's less nowadays, but all my life, yeah, I've been looked at like I was a mutant or no.
Join the X-Men.
Yeah, voila. But if I go back, I guess it comes from the fact that I'm a single kid. Okay, I don't have brothers and sisters. My father abandoned me when I was 3 years old. Okay, and he abandoned the family. He went away. I saw him again just when I was 19. My mom never got remarried again until I was really grown up. So my family was two-person, my mom and me. My mom was a teacher. She was going to teach every day. When she was coming back, I was just the last student. She was doing the job of the father, of the cop, of the teacher, of everything, but not really the job of the mom. I would say not the job. She was doing the job of the mom, not giving the tenderness, the kind. She couldn't do because she had to be hard on me, kind of. Mm-hmm. That was her way of seeing things. So I have nothing to blame. I'm not doing her. But the thing is that I had to build my own world. I was hyperactive all the time. And I see my baby girl, she's the same way. I had to do things. If not, I get crazy. I'm totally impatient. I cannot stay doing nothing. This is just impossible to think about. Staying on the beach, looking at the sun, like resting? No. My brain has to function, do something. There's something to do. So I guess I had to create my own world. If not, I would have been crazy. What happened is that every time I tried something new, whether in sports, arts, dance, music, games, stamps, whatever. If I started to like it even a bit, I would go a little bit further. And if I kept on liking it, then I'd go to the end. Then I had to dig and dig and dig and do my best, become as best as I could be with my self-training or whatever in this field to masterize it. And then if I still like it, keep it. The only thing I'm not doing anymore are the stamps. I still have them. I keep them for my baby girl, but I collected the stamps, but they offered me my first album to collect stamps when I was 5. The year is written on it. 5. You start ungluing the stamps, sorting them by country, putting them by date and all. You learn organization, sorting, and collection. So my grandma was always telling me when I was a lot older that she fought because my father abandoned me and all the situation in my life and my family, my history, I would say. She thought I would turn bad. I would be, like a guy stealing motorcycles, doing back wheels, whatever, all that. And before she died, she told me, I'm so surprised that it went totally the contrary. I guess to not turn out crazy, I had to pick up in everything that the world could offer and that I could access. And if there's something that I really like, integrate it into my world, become as best as I can in the time given to me for this thing. And then it's a new rope to your bow to never get bored. And your bows are now 20 different ropes that you can shoot, depending on your mood of the day. And that's it. And it came on like that my whole life. So I guess hip-hop, roller skating, the music, the people who were roller skating, dancing with me and all that, they were seeing that guy. They were not seeing the gamer. The people I was gaming with, they were seeing the gamer, and they would then see the Now, there's a lot of people who shared sports and games. I had quite a lot. But, yeah.
I totally get that. And it makes so much sense.
Like, answer your question, because it was a tough one.
Yeah. No, I think...
I never had to go back so far.
Yeah, I totally get what you're talking about feeling the need to dive into worlds and to enthusiastically take everything that you can and then make it better and build upon it, and exploring different hobbies and pushing a little bit further and bringing it to reality. And I think in a lot of ways that is kind of why you probably ended up becoming a tabletop game designer, is you were able to eventually create these worlds with their own systems. You know, you're talking about making it so you're not bored, so you're mentally engaged, so you're actually participating in something. Well, every new game that you create, it feels so dramatically different. Like, that's something that I would say is distinctive about you as a designer, is that each game feels radically different, with different themes, with different mechanics, with different approaches. And it's not just like, this is a worker placement game where you do X, and then here's a worker placement game where you do Y. You're like, no, we want to have a real-time game here. We want to have a 4X game here. Earth Reborn, it's going to be like a heavy metal album cover that's, I don't know, it's the closest thing that I played to XCOM in a board game. Yeah. You go for these radically different worlds, and I imagine that that's what kind of focuses your mind and allows you to explore as though that world were a hobby unto itself.
Well, I guess I do the same in music. You were talking about music before. Every song I do, I start it totally differently. Every time I experiment new techniques, I try to, I never tried to do this first, or I never tried to do the lyrics first, or I never tried to use this keyboard. Let's do a song totally with this key, this VST plugins or whatever. And for the games, sometimes if I'm like, as I was saying, I'm outside in the garden and sitting here and kind of like doing nothing, and I cannot stand that, as I was saying, then I would twist my mind into, okay, think about a new thing, something that's never been done, something you never did, and something that has never been done. Ooh, that starts to become really hard. Not something that I've never done, but something that has never been done with 5,000 games putting out per year. That starts to be really hard to find, I guess impossible. So anyway, it's... I don't know. I think for me, it seems to me like even for a song or for a game, what's the point doing the same thing that either you already did or that has already been done, or even if it's a slight difference of something that has been done. For example, I'm going to give you a very good example. Now, what I'm like buzzing my brain on for like 2 or 3 months, probably 3 months. One of my favorite games that is not in the top 5 that they asked me lately, and it should be. But top 5 is the top 5. Which one would I kick out? It's Blood Bowl. I really love Blood Bowl.
It's classic.
Yeah, I would love to have my own Blood Bowl with more control, with different things. I'm not saying Blood Bowl I would have to change a thing on how it's made, but I would like to design my own Blood Bowl. Well, if I do a Blood Bowl, a fantasy football game, there's been quite many on the planet, so there's no... Games Workshop cannot say, we have the right to do the fantasy football game. No, you cannot. So as long as you don't copy everything in it. But then again, I was like, you have to really create something that fits you more, that is different. Better, I'm not sure you can do better than Blood Bowl because it's already super good. So I forgot about that. I'm going to try to do better, but I don't think it's possible. It's already good. I'm going to do different, very different, super different. Because if not, then there's no point doing another fantasy football game for me. And that's why lately, again, I bought quite some miniatures of Games Workshop and other manufacturer, because there's tons of manufacturers that do Blood Bowl miniatures. And I don't know. So far, I have many path opens, many things that I wrote down. Maybe... in the future to come, I will have designed a Blood Bowl game. But the first thing is that I have to take it totally from a different angle.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's hard to not always draw the comparison to something that you really love when you're trying to create something new. And then are you, in trying to innovate so much, are you paling in comparison to the thing that you loved in the first place? It's a challenging thing.
That was the thing for Earth Reborn. Earth Reborn, for me, it's my first Spacehulk-like game. I compare it to Spacehulk. It's the closest one for me. For you, it's XCOM or whatever. But for me, when I did Earth Reborn, the idea was I have to do something that I love to play even more than Space Hulk. And what's so funny is that if you look in the old forums on Board Game Geek, when the game came out and you go somewhere in one forum, like the 10th post that a guy posted when the game came out is it does a whole description of the game and say that he loves Space Hulk, but at the end he says, "So long, Space Hulk, I barely knew you." And then I was in front of my screen and I was crying in front of the screen. Saying, just one day after the game come out, a guy who was really a connoisseur tells that he loves it better than Space Hulk. So objective one. So and now when I compare, nobody would compare Space Hulk to Reborn almost. It's they're really so different that you cannot say it's a copy. There's the line of sight. Yeah, you cannot reinvent line of sight. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so let's get to some history. Let's just quickly get through some of the stuff leading up to the point where you're at now. So Dungeon Twister, I think, is probably the first monumental game that really you are known for, but it wasn't the first game that you published. What was the first game that you ended up publishing?
Publishing as a published game, as a box, was Halloween Party. It was published by Jeux Descartes in 1999 or beginning 2000. No, I think Halloween of 1999.
How do you feel about Halloween Party today? Like, what's your reflection on it? Would you sit down and play Halloween Party?
At that time, they asked me to do some modifications to render the game more interactive, they were saying. I had some more interactivity, but it made the game more complex. So there was a V1, version 1, and a version 2. The version 2 is the one that got published. If I had to play it today, I would play the version 1. But when you're a young designer and a publisher asks you to do this and that, you just shut up your mouth and you do it. Yeah. And at that time already, I knew that it was not the good thing to do. But now we've, the looking back at it, but it's not the best one. But it was a very original one because it was the first time when you had a game on the table in the world, I guess, that you had cards in hand, but the cards you have in hand, they're not for you. They're for the others. For the others to play. That reminds you of another game, no?
Yeah. I totally get where you're going with that.
So 1999, I had a game where you had to trade and give away the cards to the other players. And when the players reveal, it was a trick or treat, really. When the player reveals, then the effect triggers. So for the originality, super original in 1998, 1999.
You're already going for these very different, very original ideas. And then you have Dungeon Twister comes out in 2004, is that right?
Yeah, well, it's not when you say monumental, that I think that is too much. It's nothing monumental. Like it's a big game for a gamer's game, a geek game. But I think we sold, totally got sold around the world with the expansions, 100,000 and 120,000, something like that. But that's not a big game. Like Mr. Jack did 10 times that probably, or whatever. It remains notorious or whatever, because no other game did that, and because it was the very first Eric Fantasy dungeon crawler board game with zero random. And that's still the case, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I say monumental because within the hobby, as is right now, within the type of people who go out and listen to tabletop gaming podcasts, it remains at least in cult status. It's something that you are well known for, and people would seek the designer who designed Dungeon Twister. Now, when does Ludically become a thing? Because you're the co-founder of Ludically, you're still co-owner of Ludically. So when did you decide, you know what, instead of publishing board games with other people, I want to start publishing those board games myself?
Well, it came from a big deception. I was working on the game that I designed for another company at that time that hired me because this was like a dreaming thing to do for me. Like if somebody would hire me to do a Marvel game, he knows that he will have my total 100,000% dedication on the thing, that I will have a blast to it. So it was this case. And I worked for like 2 years, a year and a half, nonstop almost on this game, and got almost paid nothing. Like barely a little half of the little bit of advance royalties, like 750 euros to be honest, and to give the precise amount for 1 year and a half of work. And this game, they didn't put it out at the end. They dropped it. And they dropped it. I'm not going to enter the details, but they dropped it for reasons that were totally unfair and not valid. And on top of that, I never got paid the other half of the advance royalties. So at least they didn't keep the game and say, okay, now the game is mine and all. And the person who was the most playtesting, blind testing, the rules, and the backstory and everything of this game was the person that would become my partner, was Jean-Charles Mouret, because his English was perfect. And I was writing everything in English for this company and all. And he didn't know anything about the game. So every 15 days or what, he had a new scenario, a new block of rules and things. And he was testing. And then when everything got dropped for like a day or two, I got totally crazy in my house, calling everybody, like, what could I do with this game? Who's going to sign it? Blah, 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 blah. And I couldn't get any hook or whatever. And then I had the idea to propose to Jean-Charles, but you know the game. You're the one with me who played it the most, who blind play tested the most. What do we say? We don't need whoever or what. Maybe we can, if we can check all the abilities we have together, the skills, maybe all the skills we have, we can put out the game ourselves. And so I dropped the stone in the lake, as we say in French, like making ripples or waves. And he didn't sleep at all the whole night. And the next morning he called me and he told me, yeah, okay, let's go for it. So we started Ludically on the base of one of my motto, which is there is always a way to turn something negative into something positive. And here I had something super negative, super bad that was about to disgust me from working in the gaming business, kind of. That wanted me to push me almost to drop everything, but I wanted to save this project. And Jean-Charles, who played it the most, believed in it. It's like, how can they not do this game? It's crazy killer. And so he had some money aside. I had some also, and we put everything together, and we started Ludically.
When was that?
That was the idea dropped in 2008. I think Ludically was created in Cannes Festival 2009. That's February 2009.
And was Earth Reborn your first game that you actually published?
No, the first game we published was a very small game, a little box, because I had the idea like so fast and crazy, and it was a killer idea apparently. It's really a grand public, familial. It's called Differences. Do you know this game?
No, I don't. I'm sorry to say I don't.
No, it's okay. We printed, for the first print run, we sold like 17,000 boxes in a few months.
Wow.
It's the simplest game. It's the simplest game I ever designed. And I think it's probably the simplest game on the planet, with another game that is very, very known, but a lot more successful, because you get the punch from the grand distribution, from the big guys, the big companies, the big publishers and all. Right, it's a game that is faster to explain than 1, 2, 3 Soleil. I don't know if you had that. 1, 2, 3 Sunshine, something like that. You know, when you stick to the wall and I tried, and explaining the rules of 1, 2, 3 Soleil are longer than explaining the rules of difference. Differences with cards, and you just look for difference between two cards. Simple as that. And the first one who finds the two difference wins the card. And
it's sold. Man, that's a great way to start out a company. And that's a great story, a great origin story. And speaking of origin stories, we got to just deviate from this origin story of Ludically and you developing into the game designer that you are today to talk about Marvel Comics really quick. Who's your favorite hero? Like, who's your jam in Marvel? Because clearly you are a big fan.
Well, I have many that I like. I have everything they printed, so I like. If not, I wouldn't buy everything. But I think the one that I've read the most and I'm the most up to date with, and I have posters and miniatures everywhere, is the Silver Surfer.
Oh, that's so good.
That's my thing.
Oh, I love Silver Surfer. I mean, so many iconic stories with the Silver Surfer. And I think, if I recall, that was like Stan Lee's baby, the one that he wrote for the longest period of time.
It's funny you put this out because, well, of course I went to see all the Marvel movies since the whole thing started. But I was always saying for like the past 10 years or 5 years, they're going to redo a Silver Surfer movie, at least just for Stan Lee before he goes away. Mm-hmm. I kept saying that. I was like, we're going to have it before he goes away because he deserved that at least. Just this one movie, because the Fantastic Four 2 was not really so good.
No.
We need the real movie on the Silver Surfer, and he never got it since he was here. So I doubt we're ever going to have the Silver Surfer, or maybe, I don't know if I'll still be on this planet. That's too sad.
Oh, come on. You got some years left. They'll reboot something or another and it'll work perfect. But not for Stan, sorry to say. But, he had a hell of a legacy. I don't think he has anything to worry about at this point as far as what he got to see come to fruition in his lifetime.
Sometimes I'm trying to put myself in his... I tried a few times to put myself in his mind and can you imagine? Well, he was not alone, and Jack Kirby and all the other guys did a lot of work.
Yeah. Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby, of course.
He was not always the nice person, from what I heard sometimes, or whatever. But anyway, he left something huge, and going to the movies, seeing all those comics that were barely in 3 or 4 colors or so cheap, I would say at that time, and now seeing it like the Avengers, he must have. I don't know how he tripped out all those things.
Yeah. It must have been unbelievable. Well, I mean, you'll have that experience when Earth Reborn, the movie, is like the biggest box office seller. Just give it another 10, 15 years as these board game movies start really kicking around and we get a shared universe, and it's going to be a whole thing. But back to your story, your legacy here. Earth Reborn comes out in 2010, and then this is where 2012 Archipelago. That's the game that I most am fascinated with and wanting to talk to you about. But we have so many things to talk about, so I only want to get a couple questions in here about Archipelago. So for anyone in the audience who hasn't played Archipelago, it's a game of economy. It's a game of exploration. It's a game that has a political bent to it in the relationship that players have with one another. It's a semi-cooperative game. It's got this beautiful, gorgeous artwork throughout the entire thing. You're adding tiles into this board that's created right in front of you. It's an emergent story that's developing, and it's set in a time of colonialization. First off, when you were making this game, it must have felt like you were balancing every system under the sun. Like there are so many different game elements that are just thrown in here and working together in unison. Did you feel at any point like, man, I need to cut some of these elements, or, this is too difficult to manage all of this at one time?
Oh, that's so funny you asked that. That's so funny. Yeah, I did that. But I did that in the previous version, man.
So this is the restrained version. Archipelago, as it is right now, is like the concise version of what you originally had.
The first version of Archipelago was designed totally on the paper in the ski resort where I go every year, Valmenier, where there's 200 players in the same building, and we ski in the day, we play in the night. And I came down with everything on paper. It seemed so hot that I spent like 2 months or whatever on Photoshop, whatever, printing, cutting, doing the first prototype. People came in my house, like in summer or whatever, and we played, or in spring, and we played one big game that lasted like forever. I don't even think we finished it. And this first version of Archipelago, we played it probably 2 or 3 times only. 2, I would say 2. I'm quite almost sure 2. But the game was huge. The components, the size of the box was twice the size of what you have in Archipelago. There was twice more components. It was a huge all-night game, like I would say maybe 8 hours of play or what, like the old Civilization game. I was disappointed with the first version of the game, I have to be honest. Not 100%, but I would say I was like 50% disappointed by what we were playing. It was too long, too heavy, too that. But the few players that tried the first version, they kept sending me emails. One was from Belgium, the other one was from Paris. So we don't see each other quite often. But every time we were in contact, by the phone or by email or whatever, they were asking, where are you with Archipelago? Did you advance? And me, I was like, no, it's too big, too much work. No, it's not good. I didn't go back to it. It's in the closet. It's sleeping. I'm not using it. and for like 1 year, it slept in the closet. And those 2 or 3 or 4 players who passed on it, they kept asking me, so you shouldn't drop. There were some very good ideas, some good things in it. You shouldn't let it go. Go back to it. But when you work so much on a huge piece like that, it's like I have a good example I was giving. Let's say the mayor of the town asked an artist to sculpt a nice statue for the central plaza of a family, a nice family that he typically has in the village. The sculptor passes 5 years or 2 years sculpting this huge piece of art, and he brings a nice thing that, truck delivers, and it's a mom and a dad and the baby and the poussette and the dog and all that. And then they place it, and then before they do the inauguration or whatever, the mayor says, "Oh, this is not good. The dogs hidden the clock tower there. Oh no, we can." And they asked to modify this sculpture. Damn, the guy spent 2 years sculpting this thing. Do you think he wants to cut the dog and move it out like right now, like this, so easy for his heart? No, possible. He spent too much time. It's a piece of art. You're asking him to cut pieces here and there. You cannot do that. It's not possible, or you're not true to yourself. So I left it to sleep. And then, and that's when it comes to your question, 1 year later, I go back to Valmenier. And I look at this box and this thing, because before going to Valmenier, I prepare all my prototypes, my printer. Now I go with my printer, my PC. I can design a whole game up there. And I give myself as an objective. You take Archipelago. You come back from Valmenier with a good game that runs in less than 3 hours. And with half the volume and the components you have in this box. If you don't have less than half of what is in here, no need for you to come back. So I went and 1 full week, or two, no, it was 2 weeks, was 15 days. We switched that year. 15 days of tuning, testing, reworking totally, and I came down with 50%, kind of like 50% of the components I was under. And that's why you have a modularity of the game length of play also. The system came after. But the games, they still have a lot of things in commons, but I went with this chainsaw in it. Like I did the job that the mayor was asking the sculptor to do, but I did it 1 year later when I forgot that it took me like 3 months to do all that. Do you understand?
Oh, I totally understand.
And that's how Archipelago came back, and then it changed, evolved a little bit in the month that followed, but it mainly stayed the way it was after the second session of skiing in Valmenier.
Cutting all of that out just leaves room for expansions. And, we got the solo expansion, and then we got War and Peace. I mean, surely there's got to be some sort of things kicking around in the back of your mind. Like, if you could just revisit Archipelago and just add on 1 or 2 other things. I mean, do you have any of those ideas or inclinations that you might go back to Archipelago for an expansion someday?
So I have things. It's not things that have been taken off the V1 to the V2, because this was not totally, there was some gaming mechanics that were different. There was a wheel that was turning, and also all that is really extra components that have been removed. So I have an expansion that is called Guadeloupe, that is hexagons both sides again, but on one side you can redo totally the map of the Guadeloupe. It's the exact same map. And on the other side, I didn't design yet the other side. I want to do like in a fantasy land, something that, doesn't exist on the planet. And then, so you could play the scenario called Guadeloupe, where the map is not appearing totally at the beginning, but when you advance, you cannot put whatever you want, wherever you want. Of course, there's going to be some little letters on the side of the tiles, the hexagon tiles, that tells you that here you have to put the H tile and no other, because you're discovering Guadeloupe and it has to look the way Guadeloupe looks. But then after those hexagons, the idea is that you can shuffle them and mix them with all the other hexagons from the game. So once you're tired of playing, 10 times Guadeloupe, which was the first island that Christopher Columbus supposedly reached, then you can play with mixing those tiles with all the other ones. And you have also the other side that would be an heroic fantasy or whatever. So the Guadeloupe part is done, the map is done, the playtests have been done. I have also a lot of more cards that I designed and that are still packed in the box. Like War and Peace, I have a lot more characters, and so there could be 1 or 2 expansions coming out. And Guadeloupe, we were supposed to do this one at some point before my partner Jean-Charles left the company.
Well, you're leaving me with bated breath here. I am just excited for more Archipelago content that's coming down the road. But you mentioned Christopher Columbus, so I I have to ask about this. Now, what was it I had to ask about? Well, we get into some of the controversy surrounding Archipelago, as well as a bunch of new future projects that are really exciting for Christophe, Boelinger, and Ludically on next episode of the Cardboard Herald. As always, the Cardboard Herald is a completely free service focused on spotlighting games, gamers, and game creators. You can find all of our podcasts, including the Cardboard Herald and TCbH reviews, on iTunes, Stitcher, and our website. For more recommendations and reviews, you can also head over to our YouTube channel. We do not pay to advertise the show, so please continue spreading the word, following, liking, rating, and doing all the social media things. It truly does help us out a ton. If you'd like to drop us a line and maybe have your listener mail read on air, find us on Twitter at Cardboard Herald, or send us an email to cardboardherald@gmail.com, or click the contact link on our page. Once again, thank you for listening. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald, and you keep on gaming.